Welcome to our series, Ekklesia, on the gathered and connected relational people of God. And today we're going to dig into church's family. On one level, most of us give a sigh and say yes, reflect on our experiences of family positively as loving and belonging and accepting, encouraging, supporting. A few of us might toe curl and groan and reflect on family as complex and fragmented or dysfunctional, distant, harsh, even abusive. Whatever our experience of family, I believe that deep down we desire to be loved and valued and be known and belong. So when we talk about church and family, most of us think yes. And I think that's why in perhaps the 1990s, if you're around, lots of churches, new churches call themselves Family Church. My wife's church used to be called Bracknell Family Church. And that's because we wanted to make it loud and clear that we're not a corporate institution, or we're not a loosely connected bunch of attenders. No, we're family. And the biblical theme of family flows right from the very heart of God, from Jesus' revelation of God as Father. Yes, God is the sovereign, almighty ruler of the cosmos, but before creation, he was not a solitary individual. He was a collective, a community, a three in one, not three gods, but one, relationally connected, a trinity, a triunity. And God has chosen to reveal himself with those relationships, Father and Son and Spirit, Father loving his Son by the outpoured Spirit. And I believe humanity's yearning for this family, this place to be known and to be loved and to be belonged and to be encouraged and accepted, it flows out of our desire created in God's image to be in that family. And Jesus, created families as the core relationship within human society. Yet some of his most explosive words were about family. Let's read Mark 3:31. Then Jesus' mother and brother arrived. Standing outside, they sent someone in to call him. A crowd was sitting around him, and they told him, "Your mother and brother are outside looking for you." "Who are my mother and my brothers?" he asked. And then he looked at those seated around him and said, "Here are my mother and my brothers. Whoever does the will of God is my brother and sister and mother." And if you want something even more staggering, in Luke 14, he says, "If anyone comes to me and does not hate his father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, even their own life, such a person cannot be a disciple." Now, how do these words sound to us? Was he really saying Mary, his mother, and his brother and sisters his relationships with them were less significant than his relationships with those that were following him, those that are in his community? How could he shame his mother and brothers in this culture by leaving them outside and honor those inside the room as his family? Jesus sounds to us like a cult leader, saying that we are to hate our natural families as he places the priority of church family or his followers above natural families. And it feels shocking. Now, Jesus wasn't all against family. He on the cross as he's dying, he's saying to his disciple, his best friend, "Look after my mother." He rebukes those who say, "Oh, I can't look after my natural family because I've been giving my tithe to the temple." So Jesus honored natural family. The Ten Commandments say, honor your parents. So it wasn't that Jesus was against family, but he's in saying what he's saying, he's trying to unsettle us, trying to do something. Now, in the West, we find what he said about family shocking because we're increasingly used to the priority of family being placed not below the priority of God's community, but we see it placed behind the priority of self, of the individual. Individualism has caused the Western family to grow smaller, shrunk from the large collective extended families of more than 20 or 30 that have spanned 3,000 years. The types of families that we read about in the Bible, the type that Jesus experienced. Today, Western families are typically less than 3 individuals. The Western family continues to fragment, driven by our freedom to choose to walk away from our commitments. Some people even justify leaving their family about finding their true self. In the West, identity is so often about me and I, and so rarely about we and us. In the West, our collective associations are always voluntary. We join freely, we take on responsibilities or not as we choose, we leave when we choose, and this is true about family. Jesus wants to undermine that. He's not saying let's not have family, but he's saying let's have family truly, richly. So even as the family fragments in the West, because we've got so few collective we's, it means that we hold particularly tightly to natural family. So in the West, I guess, just like everywhere, the natural family is like the huge untouchable. And so for Jesus to say that the church family is bigger than your natural family, that sticks in the throat. That feels a little culty. The COVID rule of 6 is the icon of the nuclear family, a mom and dad and maybe 2 kids, a grandparent around the corner. The rule of 6 says we expect families to be small. We expect the Englishman's home to be his castle. In fact, the richer that we are, the more separately we live from any we around us. The rule of 6 is unthinkable in most Eastern cultures. It's got no understanding that we've got 8 huntings in our church. It's absolutely got no understanding for the Asian communities in the UK, and actually for the fact the global picture is of extended families, not of 2s and 3s. So if Jesus' words seem shocking to us, with our small families of 3 and saying put church before that, actually they're revolutionary to Jesus' hearers, because in Eastern cultures, your family is your identity. I read about a guy who lived in Beirut in the Lebanon, who showed his identity card at a cafe, and the waitress said to him, "Randolph Richards, what kind of identity card is that?" She explained that identity cards in many Arab nations always have your name, your full name, your surname before your given name. Unlike us, we have it the other way around, your surname and then your given name. And then it has your father's surname and given name. And then it has your grandfather's name and given name. The reason it's on your identity card, says this waitress, is because that's your identity. In Western society, we see ourselves as individuals, expressing our individuality by standing apart from the crowd and being our own person. This concept was totally alien to the waitress. She saw her identity not as an I, or even an I, a collection of I's that make a family, but she saw her identity as a we. Her family had fled the war in Syria as a refugee and torn from the tight community that defined them. One of the few possessions she'd taken with them was the family tree that stretched back over 1,000 years. That record of generation after generations of names, that family tree defined who they were. Without home or possessions or career, with no opinions people cared to hear, her identity was unmoved, because she's still a daughter of her father and his father and his father, and that's what it said on our identity card. This refugee Syrian waitress had a collectivist worldview. Who she was, her identity was all about the group, the family. She didn't see herself as an individual part of the group. She was the family, the group, the people. The we defined her. Jesus is calling the we that defines us to be the people, the church family. Muslims who become Christians, perhaps this woman, this waitress who should become a Christian would have understood that Muslims who become Christians understand this. To become a Christian means your own family reject you because you've dishonored them by disowning them. To become a Jesus follower for Muslims is to understand that you have a new identity and a new family, because they understand the deep-rooted nature of identity and extended family, just as Jesus' hearers in Mark 3 did. We miss this in the consumer West because our collective associations are voluntary. We see joining the church like buying a product or accessing a gym. We pay. We take on responsibilities or not as we choose. And then literally when the customer service isn't what we thought it would be, or the product doesn't live up to our expectations, we move on. Jesus is saying we need to see becoming church not like joining a gym, a subscription in exchange for a locker key and a membership card and a brief equipment briefing. Joining the church is like joining a family. That when my kids joined my family, it wasn't like I gave them a membership card. They were birthed into it. A lifelong process of discipleship began. Again and again, the New Testament writers use the language of family, brothers and sisters. For church, natural families, often with small homes of the first century Christians, became the church. And the church became the new extended family. Jesus and his followers then understood that Jesus wasn't setting church against natural families, but saw churches and families as natural collaborators in the kingdom rather than competitors. And Naomi's going to talk really wonderfully about this practically, about how church can be more like a family and how families should be more like a church.
Thanks, Howard. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how church can be family. Now, I know we've all had different experiences of family. So for some of us, that pushes maybe painful buttons, stirs up painful memories. But when I'm talking about family, I'm talking about a healthy, functioning family that maybe some of us experienced, some of us haven't. But even if we haven't, it is possible in church to have healthy family connection with other people. So I think when I was growing up, I felt that we went to church and people put on their Sunday best and they sometimes spoke in a different language than that they used throughout the week. And it just felt like a bit false, a bit odd. And then I'd see people out of church and they'd be quite different characters. And I just remember thinking, it's a bit fake, really. And I can remember thinking, I don't want to be like that. I really love honesty and I like to be real with people. So I think as I've grown up and been in quite a few different churches, some we've led, some, that we haven't, I've just always wanted to pursue relationships that are genuine and are full of quality and support. And I guess since I was 18, I haven't ever lived near my biological family. So for me, church as family isn't just something that is a nice thing to say. It really has been the reality of my experience. I think, when you don't have family around the corner or even a car drive away, you really need to plug into a great church community for that sort of support that you'd expect or need at different times from your own family. So I think that's the kind of culture that Howard and I have tried to build and create at God First. So church to us isn't corporate. It's not something that you join and you're given a badge and you're given an induction pack and then you're sent off, and it's just not like that. And you're called a worker, or you call the leader the CEO. Church should be family in that the Bible talks about us having mothers and fathers and brothers and sisters in the church. So church should be really relational. We shouldn't feel like we have to climb a ladder to get to know people, that there's certain things we've got to do before we can progress. It really should be family. It should be much more comfortable than working for a corporation. So church also should reflect, in it being family, should reflect a wide range of people. Now, I know when we first started this church, it was mostly young people, because young people were the ones who could move easily. They didn't have mortgages. They didn't have kids to move to different schools, although some of us did. But as we've grown, we've always prayed, Howard and I have always prayed for people of all ages and stages, because in the church, that reflects that we can get on and honours the gifting and wisdom of older people, the energy perhaps that younger people have. So, right from new babies, and it's been great having lots of new babies born, particularly during lockdown, right up to more mature people. We love having that real breadth of age and experience at God First. Now, obviously, with that comes lots of benefits. It also can bring quite a lot of challenges. I know that in a family, when you've got young babies that are very demanding and tiring, and then you have teenagers who are also very demanding in a different way, it can be really hard work. But actually, church it's great when we have a collection of all different types of people that perhaps really kind of challenge our selfishness and or bring out opportunities where we can serve people. So I think church should be a place where we kind of welcome people of all different ages and stages. In 1 Peter chapter 4 verse 8, it says, above all, love each other deeply, because love covers over a multitude of sins. And I think when we really love people at church, we can overlook some of those little quirks and annoyances that we all have. I mean, we all have blind spots, don't we? So maybe we're not even aware of our own. But that ability to love deeply, that, we're choosing to say, this person is quite different from me, but I am going to love them. I'm going to see the best in them. I'm going to want the best in them. I think that's a great thing. So although it is lovely in church to have friends who are like us, our age and stage, actually, if we just stick with people who are a little bit like us, it can really limit our growth, and it can deny other people the opportunity of getting to know us. And it can just kind of feed into our selfish, like, oh, I just want to be with people who get me and understand me and all of that. And I'm not against having people who are like us. I think we all need that. And the great thing about God First is, I think, we're full of really good people. But I would encourage us to mix outside of just people like us. I mean, I love people, and I love getting to know a whole variety of people. And sometimes that is more challenging and takes more energy, but I feel so enriched because of it, getting to know people and hearing about their experiences that are totally different from mine. So I think that's my first point. Church family should have a wide range of people in it. The other thing is, in church, we should feel loved and accepted. We should feel that church is a safe place where we can be honest, that we don't have to just turn up when everything's great. We don't have to keep what's really going on in our lives a secret, or for people outside of church. We can be really honest with where we're at. I think that when we're vulnerable and let people in and say, actually, I'm not feeling great, this is going on, I think it's when people are honest, or certainly when people are honest with me, it then makes me feel like, oh, I can be honest. I don't have to be all together. I think one of the great things about the God First community that I'm part of, that Mark and Sophie lead, I think we've really developed this culture of turn up, come for food, however you're feeling. Don't just feel like I'm only going to come when everything's great. And I guess through that, people have come and they've shared their disappointments, their anxieties, whatever they're going through, big and small, and other people have been able to really support them by praying for them. But obviously, there are lots and lots of practical ways that we can help. So moving on from the fact that we'd love church to be a place where we can be loved and accepted, church should be a place where we're supported, that when we are honest and say this is what's really going on, that people don't think, oh, that's really needy or that's really difficult, but they actually think, great, here's an opportunity to help. So again, I know that there's loads and loads of brilliant things that go on in God First where we practically support people. I know that we cook for people when they've had babies, when they are just really struggling maybe with their health or when they've suffered bereavement. We can babysit for each other. We can give people lifts. I must say, on the babysitting thing, when our kids were teenagers and really struggling to earn money, or a bit too young to get a job and wanting money, they really wanted to be able to earn money by babysitting. And I'm not against people paying babysitters, but we always said to our kids, do you know what? There aren't many things that you can do as a young person to serve in the church, but actually offering, as a young person, as a teenager, but actually offering to babysit for young families who are absolutely shattered and don't get many evenings out together. We always said to us, look, just do it, and it will be a real blessing to whoever you're babysitting for. And actually, our teenagers then went round to people and were fed countless times, and old people then got to know our kids. I mean, as a parent, if anyone gives your children, and as they get older, teenagers, any time and attention, it's so appreciated. So I know over the years, I've massively, massively valued those of you that have taken an interest in our kids and prayed for them and followed them on their journey. And I felt like at the time, one way that our kids could be part of a family was to offer their time. But anyway, that's something that you can work out for yourselves. But I think there's just lots and lots of different ways that we can support and help each other, particularly if we don't have our own families around. We can still do it even if people do have their families. But I think when the church is functioning as family, it's such a blessing to those people who are receiving support. But it's just such a great witness as well. So I know at work, when I talk about the fact that we've been cooking food or bringing food round or helping people out, our G1C, people are just amazed that we do that, and for people who aren't actually our family. So, family shouldn't be corporate. It should be a place, church should be a place where we're loved and accepted. It should be a place of support. It also is done, family life is done in the repetitive, routine and mundane. So although it's great as families to celebrate the big occasions, birthdays, weddings, job promotions, getting a job, those kind of big milestones, actually a lot of family life is just built around the day-to-day serving, being committed. I mean, I think of young parents, there's absolutely no option of saying, I just can't be bothered today. Even if that's how you feel, you've absolutely got to get up, you've got to get out, you've got to cook meals. There's kind of no opt out, and I really feel that that's true of church as well. That there will be times when we are more pressured and more tired. There will be seasons of life when we can't be as involved. But actually, it's true to say that the more you give, the more you put in, the more you get out. It's a great way of getting to know people, isn't it? Serving. But just being faithful. So those people over the years that have just turned up every Sunday and serve, encourage, those people are such a blessing. So it does take a lot of time and energy to choose to be involved, to be committed. But we get loads back from that, don't we, when we make those choices, and it really blesses those around us. Okay, so I'm just going to say a few things about how our families and those we live with can be like church. So I think one of the great things at God First is that we are good at welcoming new people. I think lots of people who've joined us have said, the amount of people that took an interest and spoke to them when they were very new, might have been a bit overwhelming, but was really appreciated. So I think in our families and in our homes, we can be like that. We can be welcoming to new people, which means we actually invite people round. And okay, it's lovely to have our friends round for dinner, isn't it? But what about inviting people who we know might be a bit lonely, a bit on their own, or just somebody that we have never got the chance to chat with and think, oh, I'd really like to get to know you. So again, I think it is really important to have family time and to do fun things with your family. But actually, if that's all we do, we can become a little bit insular. And I think one thing that Howard and I did really early on, and again, I'm not suggesting everyone does this, but we've had a lot of lodgers over the years. We've been fortunate to have the space to have people to stay, and I think that has been really good for our kids because they've grown up with the house full of different sorts of people. And personally, I love cooking in team, so if there's lots of us and there's lots of people around, I think, oh great, I love all of that. So I think it's good to model for our kids, if we have children, that we are friendly, that we're welcoming. It's good for them to get to know other people. So yeah, I would encourage you, don't just see your home as somewhere to retreat. It is, but don't just see it like that. I mean, the phrase, an Englishman's home is his castle. There's something about the English, the British, that like to retreat, and whether that's because we have rubbish weather for half of the year and we just like to go home and shut the curtains and put the lights on and put a film on and just be us, which is all good to do, but if that's all we do and if we're not welcoming of others, we miss the opportunity of just being welcoming, don't we? So I think we can do that in our families quite easily. Another thing that happens in church and can happen in families is discipleship. So that can be between husband and wife, siblings, parent to child, friends, if you're in a house share. The people who we live with can be a real challenge to us, can't they? I mean, it can be great living with people, but it can also be a great challenge to our selfishness. And I think that when we live together and really know people, there are inevitably things that are going to cause us a bit of tension. And then it's how we deal with that. Do we just kind of pretend it didn't happen? Do we just ignore tension and conflict, or do we kind of deal with it in a mature way? So I know that when I was growing up, there was quite a lot of tension, but I don't feel like I was taught to handle it, tension and differences of opinion, really maturely. So I think that's something that I've had to learn and we've had to teach our kids. I remember one of our kids, if things got a bit close to the mark, if we were talking about things that this particular child, if we were challenging them about their behaviour, they would just make it into a joke and just want to have a laugh. And you think, no, this is serious, Actually, we do want to have fun, but when we're talking about something serious, it can just deflect, and it's not a particularly mature way of handling conflict. Or our children, our teenagers, would just kind of run upstairs and flounce off and be in a big huff. And you think, no, we're not allowing that either. Yes, it's okay to have time on your own to process, but actually, if that is a way of avoiding a difficult conversation, that's perhaps going to help you realise what you're like and how you respond to people, then those difficult conversations do need to happen. So we'd have to say, right, you need to come down, 5 minutes, and then we'd go up and say, right, let's talk. So talking is really, really important, rather than just ignoring and rather than shouting. Talking is really important. So I think to create a culture at home of openness where people don't feel like they can't talk about their struggles or weaknesses or things they're finding hard at school or processing life. We want to have that open place, usually around the table, isn't it? So meal times are a great place to chat and find out how people are doing. One thing we used to do was say, what's been the best thing about your day and what's been the hardest? So it just helps us to think, what's going well in life and what's not, and then from that you can have a more open discussion. So family can be like church community in that we can welcome people, we can disciple each other, and also we can read our Bibles together and pray together. Otherwise, if we don't do that, it can be a little bit fake. Like, we turn up at church on a Sunday and we're these kind of spiritual people, but during the week we're not. And I think we all are encountering society's pressures and the culture that we live in, which is so anti-God, that we need to be chatting about those things and supporting each other in prayer, and teaching our children, if we have them, that actually God's way of living is the best way. That, as Christians, we aren't gonna go through life pain-free, that we are gonna encounter tragedy and disappointment and loss, and people are gonna be unwell, and some people won't be healed, and some people will die. But if we're not preparing our children for that, then I think they're going to be in for a bit of a shock when kind of these things happen to them and they encounter life. So I think just having a place where they know that it's safe to talk about anything, and they know that people who love them will support them is a great thing to have. The other thing to remember is, whether we're talking about family life at home or family life in church, life is messy. People are imperfect and things aren't always going to look great. And sometimes we manage to scrub up and look all together, and other times we completely fall apart. And that's fine, because we're human. So I think we shouldn't be shocked when things get messy, things get a bit untidy, people let us down, things don't work out as we hoped. I think we just need to keep our hearts soft towards people. That verse about loving each other deeply, loving and forgiving, and not allowing a root of bitterness to grow, so that we actually can be really healthy and mature, despite the different people and the different challenges that we encounter in church and in family. So whatever your experience of family life, your biological family, has been, whether that was good, whether it was good but there were flaws, as there are for all of us, or whether it was a really dysfunctional family, can I encourage you to think about how family can be a really positive thing to be seen in church.
Thanks, Naomi. I just love my wife's practical wisdom, her ability to see the issues and speak into them. So I hope that's encouraged you and challenged you. Father, we just pray, help us at God First to be truly a family. Not a family in name only, some corporate distant institution that we half join, that we don't really feel connected to. Lord, help our relationships in this community to be a vibrant family of love and care and support and encouragement and discipleship. And I pray, Lord Jesus, let our homes not be this castle walled up that no one's allowed to enter, but let there be a flow of friendships and relationships in and out. Let our homes be places of discipling each other, places of warmth and encouragement. Lord, I pray, let us find that rhythm of collaboration between natural family and your family for your glory and for the development of us as disciples. Lord, we say, do it in us in Jesus' name. Amen.